Welcome to another episode of Fans in Motion, the Ultimate Night Ranger podcast. Look at these two individuals. Now, you may just know their voices. These guys have faces made for radio. But on Fans in Motion, we got the video machine rolling. And I want you guys to welcome from the Growin Up Rock podcast, Steven and Sonny. Steven and Sonny, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for
Uh,
having us.
Not a problem, not a problem. Now, the reason why I got these fine gentlemen on is, I'm going to come up with, every month or so, I'm going to invite guests on to maybe rank their top five albums or top five Night Rangers songs. And when I was putting it out there, like, who do I want to like be the first ones to do this type of episode? I thought, well, maybe Joey, my buddy Joey Allen from Warrant, or my buddy John Nyman from Y&T, or that old Mark Striegel guy from Ozzy's Boneyard. But then when I thought about it, I said, no, the only two people that really can kick this thing off are my buddies Steven and Sonny. So here we are. We're going to rank the top five Night Ranger, their top five Night Ranger albums, and I'm going to tell them exactly where they are wrong. So let's talk a little bit about your guys' podcast, Growing Up Rock. You guys have been posting on the page here. You guys have been doing like a monthly deep dive into each Night Ranger record, and I think you guys are maybe up to the record seven. Tell us a little bit about that part of the podcast.
So each year, we decide to pick a band or a theme, and we do what we call an album series for that year. And this year, 2024, just happens to be Night Ranger. And so part of the criteria is that it needs to be something that both Sonny and I agree on. We are both fans of. And so Night Ranger fit that criteria. We may not love every album, but we love the band as a whole. We love the catalog as a whole. So we like to go and do a deep dive on every record. We started with Van Halen in 2020, I think, 2021. Van Halen, Def Leppard, and then last year we did a 40th anniversary on various albums. And so this year it's Night Ranger. And so, yeah, we're somewhere around seven or Hole in the Sun. I don't know by the time this episode comes out where we're at
True. Yeah.
in the catalog. So yeah, that's what we're doing this year.
And speaking of, kicking off episodes, I think, I was on the kickoff episode. I think we did Dawn Patrol, uh,
Yeah.
the Dawn Patrol episode. So, Sonny, let me ask you this, doing this deep dive into the Night Ranger catalog, what's something that you've taken away from it? What's something that you didn't know or you've learned um, doing these episodes?
Yeah, what ends up happening is when a band has a healthy amount of music out there, depending on kind of when you got into the band and what you enjoy out of that band, day in, day out, what you listen to, year in, year out, what you listen to, you end up basically going to like four or five albums and that's it. You don't listen to the rest of the stuff. And most of the major bands I like, I'm that way. There's very few that I'm not like that with. And what I learned during the Def Leppard series was the more we dug into it, the more I decided that I don't love all of Def Leppard. Like I thought the hit rate was maybe when we started, I thought the hit rate was maybe like 70%, like 7 out of 10 songs I like. When we ended, the hit rate was more like 50. It's been exactly the opposite with Night Ranger, right? Some of these albums that I had not heard in a while, at least not in full, I forgot how great some of the songs were. So if you would have asked me when we started, I would have said my hit rate with Night Ranger is probably 65, 70%, right? 3 out of every 10 songs I don't love. And I would say it's probably more in the 80% range now that we're through most of the albums. So it's kind of nice to be there. It was that way with Van Halen too, because I didn't grow up with the David Lee Roth era, so I didn't know that era as well as I knew the Hagar era. So that's kind of why we do it. So it's fun to do, but you take some chances, right? Because I had to find my 7 record. I actually had one. I had to go find it. I'm like, where is it at?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting you say that. I mean with Def Leppard, like I kind of checked out with Euphoria. Like and that was
Yeah.
a great record, and I bought like a couple after that, and after a while, it's just like, all right, I think I'm off that studio album train, and it'll be interesting to hear your guys' reviews because you know you guys are at that 7 Hole in the Sun era, which you could kind of say, you know, after 7, I always kind of call it the lost years because Night Ranger was kind of lost from 99 to through 2008, but those the after Hole in the Sun, which is 2007, starting with Somewhere in California and then High Road, Don't Let Up, and ATBPO, those are, in my opinion, 4 really solid records, and that's going into their third and fourth decade. And really, I mean, I think I speak for a lot of people is nowadays when you buy a studio record from a band, if you can get 2 or 3 killer tracks, you're kind of happy. And you know, because a lot of the stuff I buy that's new is it's always sometimes not that great. And with Night Ranger, it just seems like these last 4 records have just been phenomenal, almost you know from start to finish. So it'll be definitely interesting to you know hear your guys' thoughts and opinions uh, on those records. And then you guys like they said earlier, it's not just Night Ranger. That's like a once a month episode, but I know you guys do recently like a smash trash and meh kind of thing. And I know you guys did something on Soundgarden,
Yeah.
you know, maybe
Yeah.
ranking some of their records. So you know, it's all over the place. I mean, you're not tied into just one band, and you can do all kinds of different stuff. Where's the best place if you know there's you know, someone out there? Hey, I want to go listen to this Growing Up Rock podcast. Where's the best place for them to go and find you guys?
Yeah, so you can find our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. I mean, it's available everywhere from Spotify to Apple to whatever Google's using these days. I think they got rid of Google Play. So anywhere you can find your podcast, you can find the Growing Up Rock podcast. And I think the message that we want to send is that the podcast covers rock and roll. It leans towards the heavier side of things, but not heavy like thrash metal, more like melodic rock, stainless steel rock, as we've talked
Mm.
about before. We like melody, we like loud guitars, we like good singers, we like all that stuff. It doesn't mean we don't dip our toes into different places, but that's what it's at. And we have a lot of different themes and a lot of different types of episodes, but they all center around music. And the one thing you can do when you come to our podcast is hear bits and pieces or get turned on to music that you either forgot about or have never heard. Because one big thing that Sonny and I hear all the time is there's no good new music. And to that, we say, total crap. There is good music. You just need to know where to look for it. And it's all over the place. So come to our podcast and let us turn you on to some good new music.
There you go. There you go. So the Growing Up Rock podcast, everything you need to know about rock and roll and the Bonnaroos, great San Francisco band. Um, so guys, you ready to jump into your top 5 Night Ranger records?
Yeah, so let me give you a little disclaimer here before you get started, at least for me. So we're in the middle of this. We're actually on the downside of this Night Ranger album series this year, and at the end of the year, for every one of these album series. We normally rank all 12 records. And that's the other criteria I didn't tell you about is most bands that we do, well, all bands we do, pretty much have 12 studio records and we go through them. If they have an extra one or they have something that we want to cover, we usually do like a bonus episode at the end of the year. But then we go and we rank them overall. So you're getting us close to the end, but not quite at the end. So we're going to rank five, our five favorite Night Ranger records for you. But my disclaimer is I may go through these last couple records in November and December and decide one of them is moved up to my top five. I don't know, but I'm going to give you my five right now. How's that?
Well, well, listen, I could give you my top five tonight, and I could drink a couple beers, wake up in the morning, and it could be totally different. So, so that's totally fine. And 13 records in that discography, not 12. Don't forget about feeding off the mojo there.
I'm not, but that's what I'm saying is you're right. There are 13, which means that at the end of the year, there's going to be a bonus record.
Oh,
And
okay.
because we go chronologically, that bonus record is going to be in the band played on because it's the 13th
Right.
record, right?
Right. It is. It is. It's just you'll see, depending on the source, sometimes you'll see 12 Night Ranger records or you'll see 13 because they like to sometimes forget about that great record feeding off the mojo. So,
We've already done it. It's out there.
yeah.
Our review of Feeding Off the Mojo
Well,
is there.
give us give us the short versions, Stephen. What'd you think of that record?
It was it was that's why we like these kind of series because it did allow me
Yeah.
personally to dig into the record really deep, which I had never done before. And it was way better than I remember it at first. I didn't
Mm,
like it the first time I heard it.
yeah.
I went through this record and it was way better than I remember. I will say that I don't think that it's different. So I
Mm,
accept it for what it is, the same way as I sort of accept Unmasked from Kiss the
yeah.
way it is. It's a great pop record.
Yeah.
There's some really good stuff in there. But yeah, overall, I dug it.
Well, we'll talk about it more because I'm sure it's going to be in both your guys' top five. Um, let's say, Sonny, come on, buddy. Let's give me your number five.
All right, so my five are not going to change even if we when we finish because I've listened to all the records already, so my five not going to change. And my number five is actually one of the newer records, and is somewhere in California. And there's something about they bring back really the rock. Like the keyboards are there, but they're buried in the mix a little bit, and the energy is really back, and you can tell. And it was very similar to when Striper had it figured out. They had a couple of lost records in there too, and then all of a sudden it just changed. It got heavier. Now Night Ranger didn't really get heavier, but the production makes them sound heavier, and it's crunchy. And the songs, man, some of these songs like "Lay It On Me" and "No Time to Lose You" and "Growing Up in California," they are incredible songs. And even the two that I didn't love, which I will call the two epic songs on this CD, that are two longest songs, don't love those songs, but they're not songs I would go turn off. So I was very, they brought me back with this record. And I remember seeing them live on this tour. And I was like, all right, they're back. And I had never heard of Joel Hoekstra until this, right? So I'm like, who is that guy? And where's he been? What other bands has he been in? And then you can't find anything on the guy because nobody knows him, right? So, um, but yeah, somewhere in
Yeah.
California is my number five.
Good selection. Definitely, it kicked off that decade of resurgence. Um, Again, I talk about the lost years, kind of like 99 to 2008, where they're kind of playing live here and there. You get one studio record in 2007, Hole in the Sun. not quite up to par. And kind of like what you said, kind of returned to form. It's a good, solid album. And, what's crazy is that title track, Somewhere in California, was supposed to be on Jack's solo record. And the guys heard it and like, no, that's a Night Ranger song.
Yeah.
And it ended up on that record. And yeah, Lay It On Me is a fantastic song. And Steven, you're number five, buddy.
All right. My number five record is a record that I know is sort of hit or miss with a lot of Night Ranger fans, but I actually like it. And I have the series this year to go back to that helped me really get back to that record. And it's Man in Motion. I absolutely love Man in Motion because it's Night Ranger kind of saying after Big Life, hey, we want to get back to what we are, which is a rock band. And they felt like, the record company, they had this yin and yang with the record company. Record company said, you're a ballad band. Night Ranger said, F you, we're a rock band. And we like loud guitars. We're not giving you any ballads. And of course, the record company said, you owe us a ballad. Our contract says differently. But songs like Man in Motion, Reason to Be, Kiss Me Where It Hurts, Love Shot Me Down, I just rock and roll. And I really, really dig that. Uh, and as people listen to our podcast, they get to know me. I'm not a huge ballad guy. Night Ranger gets a pass because they do some fantastic ballads, but I like loud guitars. I come to rock and roll for loud guitars, not for ballads. And so it's the rock and roll stuff that Night Ranger does that really turns me on. And Man in Motion's a great record.
You're going to have a lot of fans out there agreeing with you. It's definitely hardcore fans. That's always an album that everybody goes to and enjoys. And everything you said, I totally agree with. I always say, Don't Start Thinking I'm Alone Tonight is kind of like the sister song to When You Close Your Eyes. If it had just been released a little bit earlier, uh, maybe it would have a different history. But all those bands were struggling no matter what. Survivor, REO Speedwagon, Loverboy, all those bands were seen like basically as dinosaurs, it seems like, in 1988, even though, I mean, they weren't, but uh, yeah. And just the whole ballad thing is they presented that record to the record company with 9 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
No Restless Kind, no I Did It for Love. And like you said, the label said, we want a ballad. And so they came up with Restless Kind. The label wasn't happy with that, so they got with Russ Ballard, got I Did It for Love. And I always thought what was funny was the advertisements leading out for that record was Guitars Are Back. And if you watch that first, the only video for that record, what's the very first thing you see? Jeff Watson on a mountain playing a keyboard. Uh, it's like, all right, I thought guitars were back. So, but yeah, definitely a great album. The production, uh, uh, Keith Olsen produced that. I think he produced maybe a lot of, was he Journey maybe produced,
Yeah.
was he?
Keith has
Yeah.
produced a ton of
Yeah.
stuff.
Um, but, um, great production, great record. And if you like that album cover, you'll like the Survivor album that came out like a month earlier, done by the same guy, Hugh Syme. Uh, what was that record? Do you guys remember it?
Too Hot to Sleep? Is that one?
Yes, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's it. Same
Hugh,
guy designed both, and they look about exactly the same.
Yeah, they do look about the same. You're right.
Hugh
Yep.
Syme, very famous artist for Rush album covers.
Yes. Um, they also did Kiss Revenge, if I'm correct.
Well,
Uh, I know one guy here is a Kiss fan. Um, but yeah, that was a little, I think, maybe source of contention when you pay someone a lot of money and it looks just like a record cover of one of your contemporaries that was just released a week earlier. Might be known why he's known as Hugh Slime in some circles. Uh, Sonny, number four, buddy.
All right. So before I share my number four, because there's going to be an anomaly here that probably is not very common in your listenership here. So, first of all, I grew up in the Bay Area, right? Second, I turned 20 in 89. So, Night Ranger is about to basically implode as I'm getting old enough to drink and actually go to the clubs. So, I'm a guy that has seen Night Ranger 11 times, but 6 out of the 11 was with Gary Moon as the lead singer because I grew up in the Bay Area and Gary was in the band in my early 20s when I'm out and about hitting club to club to club. So my number four album is Mojo, Feeding Off the Mojo.
All right.
When we went back and I pulled that CD out that I have owned for 29 years, I was absolutely sold. Just gave me goosebumps talking about it. I was absolutely sold the minute I heard Mojo again. And I'm like, God, Gary is absolutely wailing on this album. And I get it. The album's darker. And I get it. There's songs like, even like So Far Gone's almost like a Jack Blade song. But stuff like Longest Days, Music Box, The Night, Mojo starting off the record, like, it's so cool that Brad didn't do the, okay, now that I'm the only guy here, let me show you what I can do. Like, it wasn't any of that. It was just like, guys, we're just gonna do what we do, and we really don't care. Um, but I'm also a guy that loves that Motley Crue record from '94 because I thought they improved. Right?
That's
I'm
her
not gonna
best.
say
That's her
they
best record.
improved. I'm not gonna say they improved with Gary, but they were different with Gary, and I liked that darker feel, and it worked for me. It was mid 1990s. It sold 13 copies. I'm sure I have one of them. Josh has one, and Steven has one. So there's the three. But love that record, and it's my number four.
That's it, folks. Sonny, pretty much. He there's not we can't top that right there. So we'll see you next week. You are right. I mean, a couple things you said there. Brad and his guitar playing. You wouldn't know that he owned a Floyd Rose for most of that record.
Right.
Different playing. You got that melody. I tell people listen to Kelly and Gary hit some of those high harmonies. I mean, it's so good sometimes you just don't even think about it, but there are songs, Tell Me I'm Wrong, the song title. I'm never wrong. Shouldn't tell me I'm wrong, but the song Tell Me I'm Wrong, they both sing parts of that and then going into the chorus, they hit some notes together. I mean, their voices just blended so well. It's funny you say So Far Gone because I've always it's kind of been like maybe the one song I'm not a fan of. Uh, but you're right. I mean, it's more, if anything, it's more of Night Ranger 80s
Yeah.
than it is anything. There is, yeah, definitely a very darker record. Lyrically, it's different than anything Night Ranger uh, had done. And Gary, I mean, God, that fucker just hits notes that is just amazing. So yeah, I mean, I could talk Mojo all freaking day, but yeah, you made my heart, warm here, Sonny, with the number four feeding off the Mojo. And if you don't listen to that record for whatever dumbass reason you have, you're just cheating yourself. Go back, just listen to it. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have Jack, but Damn Yankees doesn't have Brad or Kelly.
Yeah.
And enjoy it for what it is. Um, and I know, especially Kelly is very proud of that record and has every right to be. Kelly never sang better to me than the 90s. Like I mean, he's fucking phenomenal now and he's, phenomenal in the 80s, but listen to him on Mojo and Neverland and Seven. Just, yeah. So, I could go on. Yeah, yeah, Sonny, you're the man.
Uh,
You need a kidney or something, you let me know.
you two get a room, please. I would just encourage
I
people to go
fucking love
listen.
you, Sonny, man. Just like that fucking Mojo.
Jesus, bromance. Listen, I would encourage people to go listen to Mojo with open ears and not necessarily as a Night Ranger record. Just go listen to it for the song, for the content of the songs themselves, and hear what I heard when I went back and revisited the record. It's got some
Mhm.
fantastic song. Oh, Music Box, man,
Mhm.
what a great song that
Yeah,
is. So anyway,
yeah.
that's it.
And
Yeah.
for the label that they were on and the budget they had, that album still sounds big. I mean, that
Yeah.
you can't. It doesn't sound like it's produced on a new label in 1995 at the height of grunge. Um, all right, Steven, you're going to ruin our high now. What do you got for number four?
All right. So my number four is exactly why one of the reasons we do these album series is because those bands that stopped at Seven Wishes or stopped at Big Life and they love Night Ranger for the first two records or the first three records, that's that's why you need to come and go through these albums with us because I'm with Sonny, and I'm going to echo most of what Sonny said about this album. But my number four is Somewhere in California. It might be that he and I just recently went through this record, but man, that record, the introduction of Eric Levy and Joel Hoekstra to the band, the songs, the return of the band after after Hole in the Sun, to me, it's night and day. This is the old Night Ranger that I fell in love with some fantastic newer production and some fantastic newer members and what some great songs. I mean, this record from start to finish is really quite good.
Yeah, kind of echoing, where Sonny had ranked at five. I mean, you get growing up in California, lay it on me. I mean, you get that melodic rock with growing up in California, then with like lay it on me, you get that crunchy heavy metal Night Ranger sound, and you get the ballad like Time of Our Lives, and
I'm gonna
uh,
say don't sleep on End of the Day.
oh no,
End of the Day is not a talked about song, but that song is really, really good. That song went from me going through this record straight on to a playlist of mine
yeah,
because I love that song that much.
a rare outside co-write with
Jeff Carlisi.
yeah, from
Yep.
38 Special, who grew up with Brad. I think he lived across the street or something. Yeah, just such a great time period. Most people know I was in the military and I was deployed in Liberia, which had no infrastructure whatsoever. So our little military base of 50 people, we had a little bit of internet. And I spent an hour downloading the new Night Ranger song, right? Just watching it slowly click. And then finally it's done. And I hit play and you hear that beginning of Somewhere in California. So I'm in the middle of Africa going, holy fuck, my band's back. Because there had been one studio record in what, 14, 13 years, and it was Hole in the Sun. And I always describe Hole in the Sun as I describe it as each of you bring in three solo songs, and we'll just throw it on a record. It sounds like three Brad Gillis songs, three Jack Blade songs. Doesn't sound like Night Ranger. And yeah, so yeah, it's definitely a great album and back to that basics, kind of like what you said. And yeah, end of the day, definitely a great song. The only song, and maybe you guys will agree with me, and I hate to be negative, but the only song, there's only one song I just wish they would have flicked off and found something else was Rock and Roll Tonight. Um,
Trying too hard to be anthemic.
uh,
That's what I said about it. It's just like it doesn't feel natural.
yeah, just it's like just leave it off.
Yeah.
I think we deduced after talking to Eric about that song that they just wrote that song for their Japanese audience. I
Yeah,
mean, they used it in Japan. They opened with it in Japan for many shows, and I told Sonny maybe the Japanese audience is a little bit different than the American
yeah,
audiences.
yeah, true.
So,
Yeah, and they played here in the States. I mean, they played somewhere in California for a while. I'm actually surprised they don't play it to this to this day. They, I think it's a strong enough record, but they did play "Lay It On Me"
mm,
for
yeah,
a few years,
they opened with that one here in the States for a little while.
mhm. And you can find it. It's a bonus track on uh, maybe like one of the High Road, the next record, High Road. It's maybe a live at M3, but that's they made that a live
Yeah.
track bonus. So Sonny, number three.
All right, so my number three, like I said, I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm an MTV kid. So I really come into music about 84, and Sister Christian's already all over the radio. And I'm a sophomore in high school, so you're getting Sister Christian, you're getting Rat, you're getting Motley Crue, you're getting Scorpions, you're getting all these things in your head. If you're just uh, hearing basically rock and getting into rock. So by the time that I actually got to see Night Ranger live, it wasn't until 87. So I come in on Big Life. I enjoyed Big Life mostly. I wouldn't say it's in my top five. It's not in my top five. But that was the first record I bought because I was going to go see them. Tesla was going to open, Concord Pavilion. I'm all jazzed up. I'm like, all right, this is going to be great. And I remember watching them live going, man, they got a lot of songs I have literally never heard because all you hear is When You Close Your Eyes, Sister Christian, and now Secret of My Success. So, well, where am I? So I go back and I go get my third album here, Seven Wishes. And I remember when I got it, I listened through it all the way through. I'm like, wow, there are some absolute great songs on here. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, I've seen 4 in the Morning on MTV, right? Wait a second. I've seen some of these videos. They just don't roll as much as Sister Christian and When You Close Your Eyes do, right? So, like songs like Night Machine and Faces and Seven Wishes and Sentimental Street, 4 in the Morning, just awesome songs. But I'm going to tell you, my favorite song on here is Goodbye. And I know Steven hates ballads, but goddamn, there is something about Kelly's voice that you cannot copy. There is a soul to it. There's a little bit of a rasp to it. There's a little bit of a rock to it. But I've never heard a voice that has that same phrasing or tone in anybody else. And I'm not going to say Kelly's my favorite singer of all time because there's some singers I absolutely love, but he is unique in what he does, and man, can he sell the fuck out of a ballad. So Seven Wishes is my third one.
It's definitely a good choice there. Seven Wishes. I tell people that because not a lot of times Night Ranger is always kind of when just trim the fat or whatever you want to call it. People, Night Ranger, Midnight Madness, Dawn Patrol, and I tell people in my the podcast that Night Ranger is really playing the places they are today because of Seven Wishes. Don't Tell Me You Love Me is a great rock song. Rock in America is a great rock song, but they weren't hits. They were rock. Don't Tell Me You Love Me was a rock hit, but you still close when You Can Still Rock in America was the first single and it basically bombed. Sister Christian, big hit. When You Close Your Eyes follows on that coattails. If they don't have a hit record out after that, they're kind of going to be considered a one hit, two hit
Yeah.
wonder. Seven Wishes comes out, two top tens and a top 20. They dominate MTV. Think about MTV from 84, 85 into the first half of 86. Think of all those bands and Prince and Madonna's and, outside of your regular just rock stuff. And Night Ranger just dominated that. And Seven Wishes was the first record where the majority of Night Ranger fans who came from Sister Christian were able to go to the record store, and that was the first record they bought when it first came out. That was the first tour that, hey, we are looking forward for them to tour. We're going to go see them. They're playing at the arena, and that album is so important. Everybody saw him on that tour. Well, except for Sonny. But he was a year behind. But
Yeah.
such an important record, and I like you mentioned Night Machine. Yeah, okay, the lyrics can be a little, but such an opening riff, and the verses are great. And you're right about Kelly, such phenomenal singer. Where I would love to just go back in time and Sentimental Street, written by Jack, supposedly recorded with his vocals, and producer stepped in and kind of said, you know, I we're going to have Kelly sing it. And I mean, that's just how powerful Kelly's voice is, where you're telling Jack Blades, you're not going to sing your own song. So definitely an important record, I guess, is where I'm getting with that, and sometimes an overlooked record. Steven, my man, what do you got at number three?
So I'm going to echo Mr. Pooney,
Yeah,
but
we
for
didn't share ours, so we don't
yeah,
actually know
no.
what each other's saying.
No, we can't because we know each other enough. We can probably guess to a point, but yeah, for me, it's going to be Seven Wishes as my number three, and I've said it often. My reasoning is a little bit different than Sonny's. So I go to Seven Wishes for songs like This Boy Needs to Rock, Interstate Love Affair, Four in the Morning, of course, just a fantastic song. But it was the combination, and I've said this many, many times over. I think the combination of music and actually seeing the band live is that's what explodes your fandom for a band. And although this wasn't the first time or the first tour that I saw the band live, I can still remember, coming out of the genie lantern at the beginning, and just it's a fantastic marriage of seeing them live and this record. And that's why Seven Wishes is my number three record.
So you saw them on this tour.
A couple times, a few times. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
remember who opened, but I definitely saw this tour. And in fact, I recently went back and watched. You can see this live in Japan, I think, for this tour or whatever. I think that's what it was, live in Japan or something, where they come out of the genie lantern at the beginning and everything, and just a really good set list. And yeah, I
Mm.
dug it, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the live in Japan is Midnight Madness. What you're watching is just Seven Wishes Live was recorded at Irvine Meadows September of 85, released on VHS, and where probably most people saw it was MTV Saturday Night Concert. They aired it there. Um, but yeah, that was the tour. That was them at their height. Uh, Really, record wise and touring wise.
Yeah.
They headlined Big Life, but it wasn't quite where they were at with Seven Wishes. And I like that you mentioned like the rocking, songs where you got This Boy Needs to Rock, Interstate Love Affair, which there that was released the prior
Uh,
year on
teacher
Teachers,
soundtrack. Yeah.
and it's a different mix. I mean, it's very noticeable, different. I won't say it's a different mix; it's a different recording, um, and uh, I still try to get them to do Interstate Love Affair. I got them to do it one time at a sound check. You know, it sounded kind of like how you would expect, you know, after 40 years of never playing it. But you know what's funny about Interstate Love Affair? You guys know this. Bands are usually their own worst historians. Somehow that song came up, and Jack's like, "What record was that on?"
Yeah.
You know, to where it's like, you know, you just expect him to know it's tracks eight,
Nah.
you know, this record, but um, yeah. So did you buy that record when it first came out,
Oh,
or
oh yeah. Yeah. You mentioned this was the height of their touring and their records. I had seen them on Midnight Madness, and I'll liken the Midnight Madness tour because they did headline on Midnight Madness once Sister Christian broke. I'll liken that to seeing Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour. After that record, it's
did we lose you?
Yeah, we
hold
lost him.
on. They kind of have. Hold on. I'm back.
Oh, good Lord.
They kind of have that minimum staging, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this is big, we're minimum, but here's where it is, you know what I mean?
When you saw them on Midnight Madness, did they have like the building kind of built banner behind them? Do you remember what was behind them?
I don't recall much about that show.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I remember it was fairly minimal, and then seeing them the following year or 2 years later, whenever it was,
mm,
for Seven Wishes, it was like, oh, now they have an actual show. Here's a cool stage prop, and they have these bi-level stage, and they have, you know, the cool intro and the cool coming out of the land. You know, it was a show. It was an actual show, whereas when I saw them on Midnight Madness, it was kind of like, here we are, and
mhm.
we're headlining in an arena, and we're on a big stage, and maybe we've got some backdrops, but I
Yeah.
don't remember a whole lot more, you know?
There's a, you know, speaking of that Midnight Madness tour, you saw him on there was, you know, a story where I think it was Bruce Cohn, their manager, was saying where they got booked in like Madison, Wisconsin at this little club before Sister Christian. You know, little club, booked them for a few $1,000. Sister Christian hits, that place just sells out completely. And Night Ranger has booked dates around it playing bigger places. And then they had to go to this small club that they had, you know, booked out so far in advance. And Bruce Cohn told him, "You will never make as much money as you did tonight," you know, because he got them on this Sister Christian bubble, but booking them before it had come out. But yeah, Seven Wishes, man. It's uh, definitely an important record and sometimes overlooked. And uh, I mean, just songs you don't, you know, Faces. We haven't even talked about Faces. We talked about Kelly Keagy, such a phenomenal track, and you know his vocals. And I would love to see them do a tour where they focused on that record, at least play most of the songs or um, you know, all of
Next
them.
year would be 40 years, right?
Yep. And I have been vocal on that. And I've told him basically the same things we have kind of talked about, Stephen, where that was everybody's everybody saw them on that tour. And that was their big tour, you know, with the production and everything. Everybody's got a Seven Wishes story, except for Pooney. And and I think it's something not to be overlooked. Sonny, number two, my friend.
All right, they're making fun of me not seeing Seven Wishes. I'm younger than Steven is. Sorry, I'm not 63. But if
Hey,
I
hey,
was
hey, hey.
63, I would have saw it too.
I was 8 years old in 1985, and I made my grandma take me to go see him. All right, so no, number two, my friend.
All right, so number two, like I said, I come in at Big Life. I'm going backwards, and they've got three albums out there, and um, so I pick up all three cassettes. I got it in cassettes first, and my number two is going to be Dawn Patrol, right? Whether it's Penny or Eddie's coming out tonight, or Call My Name, or Sing Me Away, or Don't Tell Me You Love Me. I mean, those are all great songs, and probably Don't Tell Me You Love Me and Sing Me Away is probably the ones you hear the most about. But where I thought that somebody missed, and this isn't, I can't blame the band, so I guess I'll blame management, or I'll blame the record company, or I'll just blame timing. Maybe it was because they were a new band. But Young Girl in Love, if it lands on a movie soundtrack a la Ghostbusters or Footloose later or Flashdance later or so, it would be one of the most iconic songs coming out of the 80s because it is built to be a movie soundtrack song. I think there was a movie called I don't think there was a movie called Young Girl in Love when it was all said and done. But you get what I'm talking about. There's something, but they're a new band, so maybe they don't have those kind of opportunities. But it's too bad that somebody didn't go back and pull that and say, you know what, let's use this for Flashdance. And all of a sudden, bam, you got a Kenny Loggins type number one type hit type of thing. It's too bad they missed on that. I've always loved that song and always thought it was a deep cut. But my number two is Dawn Patrol.
Yeah, Dawn Patrol, phenomenal record. I mean, I think you could put it up there on, when you talk about hard rock debut records. I think that deserves to be mentioned. Talking about Young Girl in Love was the third single from that record. Uh, Released probably somewhere like June of '83. And I only say that because trying to narrow down the actual release date for Dawn Patrol, I was talking to Mr. Jack Blades, and he's like, "Well, let me see what I can find." And he found this box from Boardwalk Records, and he's like, "Well, maybe this has stuff." And it was just a box of 45s, Young Girl in Love, dated June of '83. So that's kind of where I know the exact date from. But what probably hurt that, kind of where you were talking about what happened, was probably not too far right after that, Boardwalk went bankrupt.
Oh,
And one thing that hurt Dawn Patrol was Night Rangers out there touring with Sammy Hagar that summer, and people are seeing them. No one could buy their record because Boardwalk went under. MCA eventually picks them up and gets everything kind of going again. But I guarantee you, within a month to 2 months of that single being released, Boardwalk Records was done. So that probably didn't help the situation. But and Young Girl in Love is definitely one of the different sounding songs on that record. Um, Probably the most pop, maybe oriented, I guess. Maybe is I don't know if that's the right terminology, but uh, where most people focus on "Don't Tell Me You Love Me"
yeah,
and
of course. Yeah.
Eddie and "Can't Find Me a Thrill." You kind of got that "Sing Me Away" is probably a better example of the pop, you know, rock and "Young Girl in Love." But yeah, a lot of people don't know "Young Girl in Love" was the third single for that record. And I think when I ranked my records, Dawn Patrol was my number two record as well. Steven, where are you at with it? Number two.
My number two is probably a bunch of people that are major Night Ranger fans are going to gasp, but my number two record is Midnight Madness. Uh, to me, so I think when you get to these earlier records, especially if it's where you came into the band, there's always going to be that nostalgia. you're always gonna tie your childhood memories to these records and this music. And Midnight Madness was the first tour that I saw Night Ranger live. So it is, pardon the pun, sentimental street for me on some of this stuff, But there are some great rock tracks that I keep going back to on that record, but the record as a whole, I don't go back to a ton just because Sister Christian, we've heard it a million times. Do we need to keep hearing it? I don't know, but for whatever reason, I've heard Rockin' America a million times. I keep leaving that play, but it's songs like Touch of Madness that I really, really enjoy. Like those are the songs for me. Touch of Madness, Rumors in the Air, of course, When You Close Your Eyes, because it's a fantastic song. So those are some of the tunes that I really, really enjoy off of Midnight Madness.
Yeah, I mean, Midnight Madness, when I, ranked I, put that as my number one. But kind of, I get it. We've heard Still Rockin' America, Sister Christian. You hear those a lot, but what's so phenomenal about that record is hearing like What Is Love Had to Change, Passion Play, Touch of Madness, such great, songs that you don't hear a million times. Even, I mean, I think sometimes the general consensus, and even by some members of the band, like Chipping Away is maybe the weak track from that record. But there's parts that,
There's a weaker track on that record.
all right, I want to hear it.
Uh, there's
There's
Come
three
on.
weaker tracks on that record to me.
yeah, there's a couple weaker tracks. So what I would say, my number two and my number one are gonna tie together, and I'm gonna explain to you why Midnight Madness is number two and why the record that's at number one is at number one for me personally. But there's Midnight Madness is not a perfect record for me. There are two or three songs on that record that are weaker songs. Obviously, the Sister Christian is not a bad song. It's just fatigued at this point. But yeah. Anyway, I'll leave Sonny to it.
All right, Sonny, with that comment and with your ranking of Mojo, I mean, listen, you're definitely the expert here. But Stephen, with you saying that your number one and number two are going to tie together, why don't you go ahead and give us your number one?
Well, I'll give you my number one. My number one is my entry point for Night Ranger, which is Dawn Patrol. I got in on the bottom floor. And the reason that I love Dawn Patrol, by the way, is a perfect record for me personally. And the reason that I love Dawn Patrol so much is because it's there are not really, unless you want to consider Call My Name being a ballad, there really are no ballads on that record. It's a straight up rock record. Now there is some poppier stuff. We call it Stainless Steel, right? We've talked about that. But to me, that record is great start to finish for me. And maybe part of it is because it is my entry point to the band. But hearing being introduced to Night Ranger through MTV and having, Jeff and Brad be upfront and Don't Tell Me You Love Me, and just these two great guitar players. And I've always been a guitar player guy, guitar players. Singers are one thing, but I've always been a guitar player guy. EVH is my guy. Brad and Jeff, great guy, great dual guitar tack. Same with Judas Priest guitar players. Same with Iron Maiden guitar players. I've always been a guitar guy, and Dawn Patrol is a very guitar oriented record. Although there's great melody and all that other stuff involved in it, but I've never really gone any differently. Even going through this album series, Dawn Patrol has remained my favorite Night Ranger record, and that's not going to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't go wrong choosing Dawn Patrol or Midnight Madness. And there's always going to be I think one of you guys mentioned that sentimental attachment to whatever record you came into the band with, you know, uh, and you happen to just be lucky that, man, like you said, you got there on the ground floor. Uh, and
Well, and one of the things I'll say, let me say, going from the raw Dawn Patrol into Midnight Madness. So Midnight Madness becomes slightly more polished. The songwriting, they become a little bit more songwriting oriented, right? They've learned their craft a little bit better. Uh, but then there's also a little bit more keyboards. There's also a little bit more slower tempo songs, as in plural. So that's why Midnight Madness ends up number two for me versus Dawn Patrol at number one. That's also part of the reason why, as I explained. I'm a guitar guy. I like rock and roll. I come to rock and roll for guitars.
yeah, I mean, I will, argue with you a little bit where Fitz is all over Dawn Patrol. I mean,
Yeah, he's buried
yeah,
though. He's
no,
buried.
Fitz is not buried, man. Fitz is all over that record and stuff that you probably think, is, sometimes guitars actually fits. But either way, uh, Fitz is, God damn, I love Fitz. Uh, Fitz is just so phenomenal on those two records. But yeah, so when you bought this record, I mean, I would assume you saw "Don't Tell Me You Love Me" video. Is that what brought you to him?
Mhm.
So, I mean, what were you listening to then? Because this is right before whatever you want to call it, hair metal or whatever kind of, comes out. Quite Riot Metal Health hasn't really hit yet. Are you listening to, like, you talk about guitar, being a guitar guy? Are you listening to Maiden and stuff like at that point? What was your wheelhouse?
Okay, what was the year of release for Dawn Patrol?
Dawn Patrol would have,
82
yeah, it would have
Okay.
late.
been late November of '82. So, somewhere there, early
So that
'83.
puts you at what, Screaming for Vengeance?
Well, that's what I'm. So I pulled it up because I wanted to tell you exactly what I'm listening to at that time.
Uh,
So I'm listening to Blackout by the Scorpions. I'm listening to Under the Blade by Twisted Sister. I'm
Why?
listening to Number of the Beast by Maiden. I'm listening to Creatures of the Night by Kiss. Black Tiger by Y&T. Screaming for Vengeance, as Sonny pointed out. Yes, absolutely, Screaming for Vengeance. So those are the records that I'm listening to, and then
mm,
whatever Van Halen record was out
yeah.
in '82, which would have been like Diver Down, I think.
Yep.
So I mean, I guess some of those bands, you mentioned Priest and Maiden. I mean, you have the dual guitars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess that falls right into,
Mm-hmm.
because like I said, I was 5 years old in '82, so I don't have those experiences. So everything I listened to from that era, I didn't get into till years later. So it's just
Yeah,
interesting to,
you missed all the good years of rock and roll. Way to
yeah,
go.
yeah. But I went to high school during grunge, so it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're sorry.
I was just wondering, like, if what was it when you saw "Don't Tell Me You Love Me"? Was it the guitar playing? What stuck out?
Yeah, I mean the guitar playing, obviously the dual guitar attack, and then the chunky guitars. They had melody. They had good singing. Jack could sing. So it was everything. I
Yeah.
mean, the hook. Don't tell me you love me. It's just a good chorus, good hook, and yeah, I mean, there's nothing to hate on with that
Mm.
song. It wasn't the video on the train tracks that didn't
What?
really sell me that much.
Um. Uh. Yeah, and it's been back then. There wasn't, I guess, a lot of videos. Did you know? Did you know Brad from Ozzy before, like when you saw "Don't Tell Me You Love Me," did you know that that was Brad Gillis who had played with Ozzy?
Yeah,
There.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Speak of the Devil, that was another record that was out that I was listening to, and I credit um, that record for actually getting me into some of the older Sabbath. Like I was an Ozzy fan, but I wasn't that keen or knew that much about Sabbath, the old Sabbath stuff. So hearing the Speak of the Devil with Gillis, to me, that I love that live record. I mean,
Yeah.
I wore that live record out, and that's what got me into some of the older Sabbath.
I'm a big Sabbath guy, and I love that record. Just Brad's twist on everything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's not like
yeah,
listening to a Black Sabbath clone. It's just totally different and energetic. Where Sabbath is usually doom and gloom. It's just kind
yeah.
of weird listening to Sabbath with, just it's a little bit something different there. Sonny, rectify Steven's rankings here with your number one.
All right, so my number one, we talk about desert island albums every once in a while, and for those who don't know what that is, it's a perfect album to somebody. And I have a list that has about 40, 45 albums on that list, but there's only one Night Ranger album that's on that list. Perfect from front to back, and it's Midnight Madness. When it comes down to it, I rock just as much as anybody else does. But since I was an MTV kid, you had to get through Madonna, Prince, Hall and Oates, Phil Collins, and all these other George Michael and all these other guys to get to the Cinderella video you wanted to see or the Yngwie Malmsteen video you wanted to see. So to me, I became a fan of Journey, Survivor, Prince, Hall and Oates, and some of these bands that you would not maybe consider rock. And then I was also a fan of Dokken and Scorpions and some of the harder stuff that most people listening here would call that harder stuff. Some people would say you don't go harder until you go to Metallica, whatever. But then Night Ranger was always kind of the middle for me. It still had melody, still had guitar, the keyboards mixed in, and the songwriting on Midnight Madness is outstanding. To see that it's their second record and the songwriting be so outstanding just kind of gives you a feel for God, these guys are headed for amazing things, right? That if they don't maybe implode, maybe Night Ranger ends up being Damn Yankees. Who knows? You don't know. But when it comes down to it, although I don't think Chipping Away is the worst song on that record, every song I love on that is on that record. And I listen to Midnight Madness at least 2 or 3 times a year in full, no
Wow.
problem.
Yeah, I mean, I listen. You can't go wrong, no matter how you rank them. It's their catalog is great, and obviously Dawn Patrol, Midnight Madness. Everybody's probably going to switch those. I put Midnight Madness as number one, but they're really such closely related albums. Let Him Run, Sister Christian, both uh, written and put on their list of tracks before Dawn Patrol ever came out. Pat Glasser is the one who kind of told him, "Hey, this record you're going to be busy. There's going to be a second record. You're not going to have as much time. Keep some of these on the back burner." So yeah, so I mean they're kind of those records are really kind of real close, and Pat Glasser, I mean, was really correct because yeah, a second record's going to come quick, but little did they know that their record company's going to go out of business, and MCA is going to pick them up and say, "We need a new record, basically right now." Uh, so yeah, I mean, Midnight Madness, phenomenal record. What's What's one song, Sonny, you put below Chipping Away?
Why does love have to change?
You know what? When I was younger, that was probably my least favorite song. And it's just weird. I mean, I'm sure we could all talk about this where albums to my 13-year-old ears and
Yeah.
my 20-year-old ears don't resonate to my old ass years I got now. To where that song used to be, maybe not, not much, to where it's probably one of my favorite tracks, off the record. Um,
To me,
and
the gauge is I'm just doing something. You know how you'll be doing something, you're working in the yard or you're working in the house or you're working at work or you're driving or whatever, you're grocery shopping, and you start humming a song, right? And you're like, why in the hell? Where the hell did that song come from? And you don't know why you're starting humming it. I could tell you why does love have to change? Never ends up there. But I can tell you, chipping away in my heart every day. Oh
yep,
yeah, that ends up in my head
yep.
every once in a while, no doubt.
Yeah, I think it was Kelly was one of the guys. I think what it was is that was like one of the what we were talking about, me rock and roll tonight or something, where it's kind
Yeah,
of like a song you throw on the end. That was where Chipping Away kind of came in, and I forget what interview it was, but I think it was Kelly kind of said, and different fans when they rank records, that's always kind
yeah,
of towards the bottom. But I love the kind of maybe the outro to the chorus, Donna takes another drag off her cigarette. Like that
yeah.
is almost a perfect little sequence there. And um uh but yeah, I mean basically what we're saying, Steven, is Midnight Madness is the perfect Night Ranger record.
And
Uh
you're wrong, like
and
usual,
you're
and you're old.
and you're wrong, and you
You're
need
old.
to
Hey, two losers don't make a right.
you need to reconsider your life decisions. Um, but there we go. Sonny is the victor here. Sonny had number five, Somewhere in California. Number four, Feeding Off the Mojo. Number three, Seven Wishes. Number two, Dawn Patrol. And number one, Midnight Madness. And coming in second place, we got Steven, Man in Motion. I'm actually a little bit surprised Man in Motion didn't make both. It seems like that is a record that usually gets thrown in the top five. But Man in Motion, number four, Somewhere in California. Number three, Seven Wishes. Number two, Midnight Madness. And number one, Dawn Patrol. There you go, everyone. Leave your comments and basically tell Sonny why he is the star in the brains of Growing Up Rock podcast. And
I can't wait to hear the comments because I'm relatively sure that's not what the comments are going to say.
listen,
But
I am going to be deleting everybody. No, that Steven guy, he's right. Delete, block. Um, no, you can't go wrong with. Have you guys got the remasters from Rock Candy? The CD.
I don't. We talked about this last time we talked. No, I haven't
Yeah.
gotten the
If you
remasters.
if you guys you got a decent stereo system, obviously get them.
I
Uh,
generally don't get remasters. I'll listen to a remix and see if I like it, but remasters, I mean, I'm my ears aren't that damn good that I can usually tell the difference in a remaster, other than it's a little bit brighter usually.
if you like, Sonny, you listening to Midnight Madness maybe a lot. Where I've listened to these records for 40 years a lot. I could pick up on things right away. Like the beginning of You Can Still Rock in America. Dun, 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 dun. All of a sudden I hear this, but I hear the bass slide. So I hear actually Jack sliding down the bass. Like, never fucking heard that in that mix. Now if I go back and listen to the old shit and just kind of listen hard, it's in there. But yes, if you get a chance and can get those, especially that being those first two records, even seven, even I can't remember what track it was, but At Night She Sleeps from Dawn Patrol. there's these like vocals on the back. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Are in the background. They've got those up, and it's it's uh it's definitely worth getting if you're a Dawn Patrol and Midnight Madness fan. All right, Steven, Sonny, Grown Up Rock podcast. Thank you guys for joining me. Everybody leave a comment. Let them know where they're right, where they're wrong in your eyes, and give us your top five. I will more than comment below it and tell you where you are incorrect or are correct. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me and talking some Night Ranger.
Thanks for having us, Josh.